Hi, we're going to read our read aloud, which is chapter 7 of Beetles Lightly Toasted. The way Andy figured it was this. If the population ever grew so big that there wasn't enough food to feed everybody, then people could save their lives by eating things that they hadn't thought of eating before. Things like lizards and snakes and grasshoppers. Not that Andy would eat them, of course, but someday, if people were starving, somebody might. Start with what you have and see how far you can stretch it, Mr. Sutterman had said. Put your imaginations to work. Maybe you didn't have to be starving. Maybe if you were just poor or you wanted to save money or save on your grocery bill, you could find stuff to eat in your own backyard. Andy knew that certain tribes ate things like grubs, which was sort of like eating worms. He had heard about fancy stores selling chocolate-covered ants and different things like that at a novelty item in a novelty store. But no one knew except the yellow cat that he had known had ever made a meal out of beetles. The first thing he had to do was find out exactly what could be eaten safely. Wendell had told him once that a university was a place where you could find out anything that you wanted to know. So Andy wrote a letter to Iowa State University. Dear Sirs, I'm writing an essay for a contest, and I need to know what bugs and things you can eat. And worms, too. How do you know if they're poison or not? How do you know if you can fix them? How do you fix them? Please answer soon. Yours truly, Andy Moeller. On the envelope he wrote Department of Bugs, and then he added the address, the one that he had copied from the catalog in Wendell's room, with his own address in the corner. Aunt Wanda saw him putting on the stamp. Who's the letter to? She said, as she carried her jade plant to a sunny place on the window ledge. Oh, somebody, Andy told her. Well, most letters are to somebody, she said, and gave him a strange look. Andy walked down to the end of the lane and toward the mailbox. He was remembering once when he was about 6 years old, walking to the mailbox with Jack. Andy had been afraid of the Moeller's turkey then, the big tom turkey, which would suddenly take a dislike to you and come flapping and gobbling over to peck at your heels. For a while, Andy had never gone outside unless the turkey was in its pen, but on this particular day, Jack had been visiting and told Andy that the turkey was locked up, when it wasn't. They'd gotten only halfway down the drive to the mailbox when there came the old Tom. Jack had laughed and climbed up a plum tree, but the turkey had chased Andy while he was screaming back to the house, pecking him all the way. And what did Aunt Bernie said? Look how my Jack can climb. That's what she said. She was always comparing the boys, and it was always Jack that came out ahead. Andy put the envelope in the mailbox and raised the red flag so the mailman would know that there was a letter to be collected. Later, when he was doing his homework on the sun porch, he had to come to the dining room and get an eraser. He'd heard Aunt Wanda and Mother talking about him in the kitchen. Of course I'm not going to ask him who the letter was to, and don't you go peeking in that mailbox either, Mother said. It's his business after all. Well, who does he know that he has to write a letter to that he can't call on the phone in front of us? Aunt Wanda went on. He's in a bit of trouble, if you ask me. He was probably caught taking something from the 5 and dime, I'll bet, and he's got to pay it back, and he doesn't want you to know. Why on earth would you think a thing like that? Mother demanded. If you ask me, he's got a friend somewhere. That's the likeliest reason for a letter that I can think of. For crying out loud, Andy said to himself, and went back to the sun porch. By the end of April, at least 9 fifth graders had broken the boycott and were trying out for the contest. Dora Cray had rigged up some kind of funnel contraption on the roof of the Cray's garage to collect rainwater as a conservation measure. Andy thought this was probably the best idea anyone had thought of so far until Mother told him that when she was a girl, they always collected water in a rain barrel and used it to wash their hair. Russ, of course, to conserve land, was still trying to figure out the way to send garbage to outer space. No one could figure out what Jack was trying to conserve. On May 1st, when Andy had just about given up hearing from the university, there was a letter for him in the box, and he was glad he found it before anybody else did. Dear Andy, your letter asking about bugs and things has been given to me for reply, and I hope I'll be able to help. Probably most insects are edible, especially their larvae or pupa. But because some of them, especially bright-colored insects, might have poisons in their bodies, it would be best to stick with crickets, grasshoppers, and ordinary brown beetles. Ant and bee larvae are also a good source of fat and protein. Mealworms, often found where grain is stored, are delicious, I understand, fried in garlic butter. To prepare insects for eating, put them on a diet of cornmeal for a few days to rid their digestive tracts of grit, then cook. Earthworms can also be put on a diet of applesauce, then simmered until tender. Grasshoppers, crickets, and beetles, lightly toasted, with the legs and wings removed, add a crunch to a recipe and can be used in the place of nuts and brownies. If you don't like the idea of dropping live worms and insects into boiling water, you might put them in a covered box or in the freezer first, then cook them later. Good luck on your essay, and bon appetit. John Burroughs, etymologist. Andy understood the whole letter except the last two words before cordially. John Burroughs. Mom, he said that evening as he worked on his math problems at the kitchen table. Oh, just like you're going to work on your math problems at the kitchen table, probably. Right? And she sat across from him going over her poultry and egg records. What does bon appetit mean? Bon appetit? Mother looked up. It's French, Andy. It means good appetite or good eating. Enjoy your meal. Something like that. Andy kept one hand over his mouth and said nothing. That's the end of chapter 7.